Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the last session of today's event. And the next 40 minutes we will spend with three brilliant speakers. First of all, Tomas Balkus, who is here in person, and he is representing the Strategic Communications Department of Lithuanian Armed Forces. Then we have two more speakers with us online, and they are here. Hello. It's Heiko Borchert, who is a Defense IE Observatory Director, and he's been working for a number of years in different universities, and also currently represents Helmut Schmidt University and University of the Federal Armed Forces in Hamburg. And last but not least, Sönke Marahrens, who is with Hybrid Center of Excellence, the Center of Excellence of the European Union, based in Finland. And we don't have much time. We have only 40 minutes to cover very particular and interesting topic, how to accelerate the use of new technologies in national defense. So security has been changing, security environment has been changing recently, and security was more privatized, more individualized, and more technologized. And these trends definitely have effects on how we prepare to counter the threats, who are very often today have hybrid effect or are hybrid by nature. And it is a lot to adapt for our national defense systems, trying to respond to multiple threats, but also national defense systems has to learn to think differently, because the only way to respond to the hybrid and multiple threats involving multiple actors is to have multi-agency or all-society approach, trying to involve various actors, which are not very probably natural for us to work with. And we have to change the thinking. It takes time. It's not easy. It's challenging, but we are learning this, and we have still to learn a lot. And I'd like to start our discussion with Sönke. And since you are working now in the Hybrid Center of Excellence in Finland, you're having, I'm sure, a lot of discussions about what's happening in the security environment in Europe. What are the major challenges and major threats for the European Union at the moment? Sönke?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Margarita. Now I can understand you. You were a little bit fading at the beginning. Yeah, what are the biggest threats at the moment? Of course, the first threat we have is the war in Ukraine. And out of this, we see Russia acting almost all over Europe, not only in Europe, but also outside Europe. And one of the main ideas, what we can see as Russia's strategic objectives, is to get to prevent European unification in the case of Ukraine. And this is mainly played at the moment on the high level via disinformation. And we also see the use of artificial intelligence. And you were talking about this a lot in the last panel, because what we see is, and we saw this in one of our documents a couple of years ago, we wrote about the renegotiation of reality. Well, that through the use of artificial intelligence, especially with pictures, you can create new realities. And the question is, what is truth at the end? And everyone creates his own truth, his and her own truth. And out of this, people start to act. From our point, disinformation is one of the highest risks we see at the moment. We see other actions, of course, and we're talking about this, some military risk. We see Russia acting in the Baltic Sea with kinetic means in attacking subsurface installations like they did in October. We still see instrumentalized migrations in different parts. Finland was the last attack area, and this is still ongoing as a question. So the challenge here is really that we see this what we call the hybrid threats in the subthreshold environment, and the subthreshold environment at the end means, are we willing to act or not willing to act? And Russia really tries to find out where are our borders, when are we willing to act, and this is where they hit us. Parallel out of this, especially with regards to disinformation, we see a lot of polarizations inside societies. That depends on where you are in Europe. Every small crisis somewhere in a country gets amplified, and not like in the past where only one side was amplified. Now we see that both sides get amplified. And by this, both sides feel more that they are in right. And this really amplifies the risk we are facing, that inside internal politics, themes which are normally minor, which can be solved within 1 week, stays in the media for a couple of weeks, sometimes even months. The challenge here is Russia does not care whether you are a yellow vest in France or a German farmer or a veteran in Belgium. As long as you are against something, especially against the government, they will amplify you, and they will support this with disinformation. And in this case, especially artificial intelligence over the last, you can say 1.5 years with ChatGPT has become like a nuclear bomb in the cyberspace, because it creates so much content, and you can create so much content in so short time that people get overloaded. And this is one of the biggest things we see at the moment, that the normal citizens at a certain point in time has no idea where he or she could find truth. They create their own realities, and out of this, some of them also feel overloaded. In a psychological way, they start to retard, going back into history to places where everything was better. And this creates, again, cracks inside society. And we have already seen that out of this kind of disinformation, physical violence has raised. And this is really something which bothers us at Hybrid COE.
Thank you, Sönke. Indeed, you have delineated the major challenges that the EU is facing, and the problem is that, you know, what Russia and other countries are doing, they're trying to work with our consciousness, with our psychology. And normally armed forces are not necessarily very well equipped to tackle these sort of challenges. But the problem with the new technologies, and in particular with artificial intelligence, is about speed, and it's about amount. It's we are not fast enough to react sometimes because we cannot process so much information. And also we are not probably ready sometimes to attribute and take measures. So what are the recipes that European Union countries are using, or maybe there are some recipes that European Union is proposing to use for the countries in order to tackle the artificial intelligence generated threats?
Yeah, the first thing to name, I think, is the just upcoming AI Act from the EU, which at least provides protection to the EU citizens when people are applying AI and making businesses inside Europe. So at least you have on the inner core a political reaction. Of course, there were a lot of discussion how far this could go, how far this should go, and are we blocking the development of this kind of technology in the way when we are doing it? And only time will tell us how successful these measures are. But the other risk still stays. As long as other states like China and Russia have access to the internet, they also have access to our data. And the large language model, which is fed with this kind of data can single out almost every person in Europe. And this risk still stays with us. Talking about the military, and I think Heiko might see this a little bit different than I do, but coming from the military, sometimes we are a little bit AI agnostic, because we classify everything, so we are not able to create this amount of data you need in order to educate, to train an AI. So this gives us, in a certain way, a little bit of protection against it, but also takes away a lot of capability and capacity for which we could use AI in the military domain. On the other hand, and this is also something what we are in Europe very aware of, freedom of speech. In order to talking about strategic communication, when does strategic communication becomes propaganda? When does it becomes disinformation? Because what we call disinformation, political opponents in certain European countries might see this totally different. And we insist on freedom of speech. Unfortunately, some people also insist on freedom of facts. But this kind of freedom of speech also prevents us from doing a couple of things because it's protected under European law. And the moment we are giving up freedom of speech, we become like the others. That's the risk in a certain way.
Thank you, Sönke, and especially for bringing up the challenges that the open societies, the democracies, and in particular the normative powers the European Union is facing. Because our openness and the democracy, democratic values on one hand is our strength, but on the other hand, trying to respond to the sharp power measures of the autocratic powers, it becomes major weaknesses. How to regulate and not to over-regulate, how to protect ourselves and not to be overprotecting. So these are the dilemmas that democracies are facing. And I'm looking to Tomas, and Tomas has spent a lot of time working with the strategic communication in our armed forces, and not only in Lithuanian armed forces. And, you know, Lithuania has been in the battleground of the disinformation campaigns and informational warfare for a very long time. So we have a lot of experience trying to fight back to what Russia is doing, but also now we're facing another challenge, hostile narratives coming from China. So what trends have you seen throughout your experience in Lithuania? What challenges, what major threats do we face?
Thank you very much. Hello?
Maybe
okay.
we can.
You hear me? Okay. Hi. I would rather speak Lithuanian, but the settings are as it is, so maybe I will not be so fluent in what I want to say, but actually, first of all, when we started to look for signs of disinformation, propaganda, and propaganda. I actually want to react to first two panels. Propaganda is not a bad thing. Propaganda in Christian world was the first thing what Jesus Christ was doing. He was doing Christianity propaganda. So propaganda is okay. Advertisement is also propaganda. I am doing here propaganda with my military uniform, advocating or showing armed forces. Disinformation and misinformation, this is a bit bigger problem. And also not understanding the information which we are sharing, this is another problem. So first of all, propaganda of Soviet Union, of symbols of Soviet Union was our first target in Lithuania when we started in 2009, and we here have first director of strategic communication, Colonel Saulius Guzevičius, here sitting with us. So he was the one, let's say, starting and showing those symbols that this is a problem. That was not a problem in 2009 for every Lithuanian, because, yeah, well, okay, it's not a problem. There was a history, we should probably respect it and so on. But then thinking about your mental state, what is created in your mind when you are seeing those symbols, create some nice feelings. You are now 40 or, okay, 60, and you remember 20 years ago, you are young, you are dancing, you are eating, you are having fun, and that was Soviet Union time. So why that was so important for us to show? Because yes, this creates you not a bad feeling to that kind of a system. But Russians were using that just to keep us in their field or in their influence circle. So we were not popular actually until 2013, when Maidan happened, and in 2014 when Crimea was occupied with green men. Again, green men, not Russian soldiers, not special forces of Russia, green men. Somebody from space just came down. And then Samoborona, so self-defense of Ukrainians in the eastern Ukraine, who are trying to solve an issues, let's say, between themselves, and it looked like civil war. So was that propaganda? Yes, it was. But that was disinformation. And that disinformation was spreading around the world with no critical thinking. So we started to work on that more and more, showing and trying to ask people to call things as they are. But we are military, and those who are talking, mostly those are politics. And here I will stop, so you understand what I wanted to say. Now we are in a different world after 2022, when now we speak about the things and we call the things as they are. Finally, thank you. But speaking about the threats, and to add, let's say, to what Sönke was saying, migration was already mentioned, but we still have phenomenon. We still spread Kremlin propaganda and disinformation and manipulation in our own media. We still give them voice. So we managed to cut off Russia Today. We managed to cut off Sputnik. We understand that these are the tools of evil. They spread not the information, but the position of Kremlin, equally the same as was the position of Nazi in World War II. So, okay, we understood. But still, we, in the first panel, you remember about the KGB chief, Tertel from Belarus. So his opinion about saying, not opinion, but the statement saying that the drone who flew from Lithuania, not the flew, but his KGB stopped the drone drone attack attempt from Lithuania to Belarus, was cited like 100 times. He was mentioned, and everyone is citing. Why we are not citing someone from? Okay, I wanted to mention a state, but again, it will be problem probably later. But we spread their news, their information that they give us to create, let's say, the world where we cannot trust anyone. The main action, the main task for Russians and Belarusians and their psychological operations is to seed the mistrust in everything we see. You see the military here talking. Now you think it's Lithuanian military officer, but then somebody will say, oh, he's a propagandist. And then, okay, what you will think later, maybe, okay, maybe I should trust a little bit, maybe not, I don't know. Maybe he's oriented to some thing and so on. And then somebody will say, hey, he was marching in March 11 of March together with those patriots. Oh, probably a problem, yeah? Or whatever. So Russians, they are trying to widen the gaps between societies. And what Sönke was saying, that they use every moment, every possible situation to create those fractions. And our media here, I want, and I will not be tired of talking about it. Politicians and media have to be responsible. They create information environment in which we live, in which our parents live, in which our wives, kids, husbands live. So if we create, just because of business, using AI, we create a lot of business. For money, yeah, investment, a lot. We use AI, it generates a lot of things, and then we create AI to analyze things created and so on. This is risky. So here I will stop.
Yeah, I have some follow-up question to what you said. You mentioned the magic word AI, and that's why we are here. So have you seen an increased use of artificial intelligence of hostile countries, either Russia or China, in the recent years? And how does it affect armed forces?
Let's say artificial intelligence we use already, and it was used for a long time. Companies in private businesses 10 years ago were selling, how to say, selling possibility for you to be more visible in internet. So selling comments in the internet, selling whatever for you just to be more visible. Now there is AI solutions which are helping you to be more visible. And guess what? If terrorist state is seeing that on the market, they will buy it and will use it. So if we create a tool, I remember in Riga Stratcom Center of Excellence in one conference, probably the first I was in 2016. Finnish company F-Secure boss, he was in the panel and he was telling that artificial intelligence is the thing we know much about, but a lot we don't understand. And if we will let it live in the society, in the world, it will create us a problem because it can amplify things. It's one thing, but they can make rifles, guns much faster than we can. In decades, they will make it in 10 minutes. What we will do then? We don't know. So now we are here. Hello. 2024, 8 years passed, we talk about, okay, now we have AI and we need to somehow control it. Now we cannot control it. So the Pandora box is open. So we will use this AI. AI regulation, now we are trying to regulate, and what Minister of Defense was saying, we will try to regulate bot activity. Okay, bot activity is like 10 years business. It is there, yes. Farms there, yes. And I don't want to criticize minister here, but what about AI regulation? So Ministry of Economy and Investment, you want to be first on the stage, so maybe think about this. And what we were not able to tell to Facebook anything about the comments, about the, well, there is already some paths, but the problem was that big company, multi-billion company talking with 3 million people state is one thing, and Europe talking to that company is another thing. So here we need to actually pave the way already now, because artificial intelligence, it's not only about the comments, it's about the text which will be so good that you'll read and you will probably be in nirvana soon. We ask artificial intelligence to make analysis according to psychological operations manual, and it does. We don't need analysts anymore, probably. So this is one thing. And I will ask artificial intelligence soon to create something which will affect all the world. Maybe it will create, but here I think we need to look at.
Thank you, Tomas, very much for painting not a very rosy picture for the future. That the world will be controlled by those who will be able to, at least to some extent, control artificial intelligence. We have to invest in this. and you know how the states and armed forces and the national defense systems are trying to do this. And now I'm looking to Heiko, and I wanted to ask Heiko, so what's your take? What are the most important trends in the development of artificial intelligence at the moment that we have to bear in mind, and how the national defense systems are trying to react to this huge threat on the level of the nuclear bomb threat? Heiko, I can't hear you. Does it work? Can you say something?
Hello?
Yeah.
This is
perfect.
now, look, this is the problem. This is the problem when you do a webinar and you're outside the European Union. No, that's the usual thing that happens. So many thanks, Margarita, for having me and for this question. I think before we talk about the trends shaping the use of artificial intelligence, I think we need to understand how armed forces think about the use of defense AI. And together with my colleagues at the Defense AI Observatory, we launched a comparative analysis that has been looking at 25 countries from the European Union, from NATO, but also from other corners around the world, such as the Asia-Pacific region and the Gulf region. So what I would like to address to start with are three issues. I think, first of all, it is important to understand that three different strategic motives are driving national approaches to defense AI. The first motif is a threat-based motif. You believe that a strategic challenger poses an imminent threat to your nation, or that a complex set of regional challenges is threatening your national security, and you consider defense AI a key instrument in responding to these threats. So in this first category, threat-based view on defense AI, for example, you find the US, you find China. In particular, China and US see each other as their most important strategic challengers. But in this category, you also find, of course, Russia, and you find Ukraine. The second strategic motif is a bit of a different threat-based logic. You could call this the fear of missing out. So you believe that if you're unable to master defense AI, you will end up in a strategic disadvantage vis-a-vis your core strategic challengers. Interestingly, there are a couple of European nations in this second group. For example, France, Italy, but also Greece and Denmark. But what is most interesting is the fact that most nations simply understand AI as a capability multiplier. So they don't really have a strategic edge through which they look at the use of defense AI. They simply believe that in using defense AI, they can augment their capabilities across the board. And most EU members and most NATO members fall into this third category. So the third category is threat-based, fear of missing out, and AI as a capability multiplier. The second context factor that we need to take into account is, I would call this the tyranny of the status quo. Interestingly, when it comes to AI, when it comes to unmanned systems, when it comes to other so-called emerging technologies, most armed forces take recourse to these technologies simply to optimize and improve what they are already doing today. And they don't take recourse to these technologies in order to empower them to accomplish different military tasks or accomplish military tasks in a different way. So the tyranny of the status quo is something that you really have to bear in mind, because it deflates a little bit this hefty rhetoric about the hype and everything that is going on. And the third element bears on some of the lessons identified from what is going on in Israel and Gaza, and also the war in Ukraine. And I think this is very important also to address in this discussion. It goes a bit back to what Tomas said before. War readjusts normative preferences. And if your society faces an existential threat, you might be ready to accept the technology that you would normally not accept. You might also be willing to accept collateral damage to an extent that you normally don't do. And you might even be willing to lower the level of confidence, let's say, in identifying targets. But this, and I think I would like to underline this if I could, this is a human decision. That's not a technology decision, no? So be careful with all the reports currently being circulated that the use of AI is enabling Israel's killing of Hamas terrorists in Gaza. It's the human decision to give the technology more leeway. It's not the technology's decision. So these, I think, are three important elements that shape the current context in which defense AI is being developed.
Thank you, Heiko, for very elaborated overview of very complex issue, but also a very concise one, while trying to delineate major trends. And my question is related to the use of artificial intelligence by the national defense systems, because we've heard already there are multiple challenges, normative challenges, but also, well, technological challenges, cultural challenges. So how the armed forces and in general national defense systems, national security systems can prepare and employ more new technologies, including the artificial intelligence, what they have to do?
I think perhaps about the priorities and then a bit about how they can prepare and also how they can push innovation. No? When you look at the priorities on how AI is currently being deployed and used, across all 25 countries, we clearly see three top use cases. And it's not surprising that these are the three use cases. So it's artificial intelligence in combination with unmanned systems, and artificial intelligence in combination with unmanned systems and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Not for the purpose of augmenting your situational awareness, but also for the purpose of improving your target identification for a later strike mission. So that's the first use case. The second use case is the use of artificial intelligence for predictive maintenance and logistics. No? Data-heavy applications where you believe that the sophisticated data assessment will enable you to use your defense assets also under strain. And the third element is interesting. That is AI in combination with command and control, in particular for battle management system and combat management systems. So this is current use of defense AI. When you look into the R&D pipelines and strategic roadmaps, it's more or less the same picture, but it becomes a bit more sophisticated. No? It's also AI in combination with unmanned systems for potentially unmanned swarms. And there it's not only the question of is a system autonomously able to follow a certain pre-programmed path, but more the question of is AI able to come up with its own tactics in how to behave on the battlefield and how to respond vis-a-vis adversarial action. And I think what is also important to understand is that more and more countries are looking into the use of AI and electronic warfare. About 8 to 9 countries, so about a third of the 25 countries we have been looking at, is investing in particular into this use case. And I'm emphasizing this because you see a very interesting parallel development in R&D priorities for AI in China, and in Russia, because both nations are interested in using AI to improve target recognition and target identification. Both want to use AI for electronic warfare, for swarming, and for unmanned systems. So what could loom in the future is the completely autonomous recce strike swarm complex. That's an interpretation of current R&D priorities in both countries. But if we already see this as a development, of course, then the big question for Europe is how would, and also for NATO, how would we respond to such a fully autonomous recce strike swarm? So these are the priorities. Would you also like me to share some ideas on how to advance defense innovation, Margarita?
Yes, please, Heiko. So what are the challenges and what the organizations have to do to change the culture, the thinking? What is the most important thing?
Yeah. I would offer also, listening to what Tomas said and what has been discussed in the previous panel, I would offer four recommendations in order to advance defense innovation. First of all, when we talk about defense AI, try to be as specific as possible with regard to the added value you expect defense AI to deliver. Surprisingly, it is very difficult for all armed forces across the board to precisely define this added value. Most of the goals are lofty. We want to sneak into the adversary's order loop. You have to speed up your decision making. But how do you implement a strategic goal of you have to speed up your decision making? You can't operationalize such a goal. So recommendation number one, try to be as specific with regard to what type of capabilities you want AI to augment in which way. As you're embarking on this journey into using defense AI, you might want to reconsider the legacy systems you have. Legacy systems offer several strategic advantages. They're already in service. Your armed forces are familiar with them. In most of the cases, we have concepts and training manuals, and these systems are certified. Now, if you think of augmenting legacy systems with AI, you give your armed forces a hand in saying, look, this is not yet what we expect in the future. So this is not yet a fully autonomous ground vehicle, but it could be an existing vehicle that will be semi-automated, semi-autonomous with the help of AI. And then you give your armed forces the option to build trust in the capability and the performance of AI. So don't get rid of your legacy systems too easily. Try to consider them as an important building block in your transition to the future. The third element that I would like to emphasize goes along using your legacy systems. And this is invest in experiments. Not try to shorten the development cycles between you have to come up with your concepts and then you have to write the specifications and then you go into tendering and then you go into developing, you know that story. This is taking you ages. But if you're able to really shorten this first stage of a product, of a new defense product development cycle and bring together military end users, defense industry, analysts, research organizations in an experimental environment, which will give you the opportunity to really critically reflect upon what works and what doesn't work, that will be a tremendous boost for your defense innovation work. And the fourth and last argument is when you educate your human forces, educate them comprehensively. So I was really surprised to see that across the 25 nations, most of these nations tailor education and training programs only to the armed forces. But what about the civilian workforce in your MOD? What about the workforce working for the defense industry? They need to be educated as well. And interestingly, there is, across the 25 nations, there is only one nation that explicitly ramps up activities to educate the defense workforce, the civilian defense workforce, and the defense industrial workforce. And this is Russia. And that, I think, is something that you really have to let sink in, reflect, and then act upon in response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Heiko. Very interesting indeed. And I would have liked to have the time to open the discussion with the audience, but the time is pressing. And we have indeed another very important panel, the stage of our event, is the experiment that the students were going through, trying to train artificial intelligence models with their own narratives. And Heiko and the others were talking a lot about the importance of education and sort of creating a certain mindset, getting ready to live with artificial intelligence and getting ready how to use it, how to train it, how to benefit from the artificial intelligence. And the students of the Institute of International Relations and Political Science have been working already not the first day for some time with specific narratives. And we have 5 groups of the students, and then they are ready to introduce their findings. So I'll ask them to come to the stage, and probably group by group. So first of all, I'd like to invite the group, which is called themselves Propaganda Hunters. Yeah. 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. Can everyone really hear me? Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really a lovely dream. Good evening. It's really a lovely chance to stand in front of all of you.
Microphone.
Because the TV is broadcasting you now.
Okay.
Mama, I'm home.
All right. So, good evening, and thank you all for joining. I would like to share with you the findings of our World Economic Forum has stated like disinformation in this decade is #1 priority, especially by artificial intelligence. So let's break it down. For the theoretical framework, we do have sets of ways to look into the narratives. In our institute, Professor Margaret and Nereus emphasized the ontological security, misinformation, and disinformation. However, let's talk about those who started this analysis before. We have a professor from University of Chicago, Harold, which says the politics is about what, when, and how. And you can see, he analyzed the propaganda in World War I and II, and that analysis really cultivates a culture which is still viable until today. We have Professor Pritz from University of Utah. The action and the mobility is more about the identity and how that is really influencing people once someone started to target that. The third one, which is from Denmark, the Southern University of Denmark, Professor Drena, which, yeah, that's really lovely when you see how ontological security, identity, the narrative, all of that into the practice and action. You can see how the dynamic is sitting. And this is really fairly new, like in 2016. Okay. For the finding, for exercise 1, it's about Russia and Lithuanian. More than 8,000 articles with the following themes using the RibSense technology. And the top story, it was about the arrival of German brigades. You can see the peak, January 23rd, February 27th, March 11th, and April 21st, which means whenever there is a news, whenever there is an investment, you can find the strike. And what's really interesting, it goes defensive and offensive. And that motion is really tricky once you track it. The second one, it's about Lithuania in international relations, worldwide, and social media, especially in Lithuanian. And we have 26 articles. Those are the themes, which are 10, comparing to the 12. The top story at Lithuania worldwide, it's about the Baltic Fleet. And Baltic Fleet, March 30th, and you have already seen the German brigade, which means the Baltic Sea is really something imminent once you target that. And for the social media at March 4th, it's about the destabilizing force for Lithuania as a country. Those statements and those narratives were really highlighted. With that, this is the current affair. And you can see NATO, Lithuania, European Union, Russia, a collective security treaty organization, Eurasia, and the battlefields, especially in Ukraine. Those are the current affairs. And there is something, it's good to keep it in mind. At a certain point, as the New York Times and Foreign Policy mention it, before the invasion of Ukraine in December and January, there is a peak of 200% using this way of communication by disinform, which can tell you an early sign. If Russia is really about something, you better track it as an early sign. This is a good way to see through the crisis management. And for Ukraine, it is something we shall not really forget. And in this decade, the outcome is going to affect all of us. Finally, I would like to thank my team, and I will say, Veni Slava Ukraina, and thank you.